So moving on to the next one, thinking this year being 2026 as well, with Visit Malaysia 2026 in the pipeline and happening this year actually, right? So how is Alpha IVF leveraging on this, especially on the medical tourism spectrum?
Right. So Visit Malaysia 2026, it is actually a very periodic campaign or episodic one. It happened some time ago and then it repeat again in year 2026. However, for Alpha IVF Group itself, we have always been and we will always also continue to be proactive in promoting our IVF services across border, particularly also into Indonesia. So with Visit Malaysia year 2026, we actually see it more like a pull strategy rather than a push strategy. It will further strengthen Malaysia overall feasibility and attractiveness as a destination, indirectly supporting our patients' interests. However, our medical tourism strategy is not so much on campaign or the periodic dependent. So in Malaysia, the most consistent and also the structured driver is from Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council. It is mandated by the Malaysia Ministry of Health, and they have been continuously promoting Malaysia Healthcare Centre internationally in ensuring that there's consistent sustainability and visibility beyond those episodic campaigns. So on the other side, operationally in Indonesia, as we have our satellite clinics, we work very closely with the Malaysia IVF Centre, where it is then very much aligned with MHTC in order to drive these inbound flows. So patients are already onboarded locally and seamlessly transitions to Malaysia for a more advanced procedures, creating a structured cross-border care pathway. So we integrate all these elements, not just simply rely on the one single episodic campaign, then that create more healthy check and balances system. So this complementary ecosystem supports scalable and resilient growth without over-relying on one episodic campaign, while we can still benefit from its broader halo effect.
Well, very detailed as well. I'm taking some time to digest that. Right. So in terms of the visibility of it as well, the key word again, sustainable visibility. Right. So I think from what we see so far, Alpha IVF is really doing well in terms of this. At the same time, also not letting go of certain opportunities that we have, especially with this campaign. Right. So moving on to the next question, with the cross-border expansion that we have now, how do you ensure that things like clinical quality, the protocols, our success rates, the operational governance and compliance are consistent, across as we expand to more centers and align with the group?
Right. Okay. So to answer your questions, Marcus, at Alpha IVF Group, we have developed what we call a system of system. It is a highly structured framework that clearly defines how each department functions and how they interconnect with each other. Because people need to understand that IVF itself, it is not a single procedure. It is a program where every functional departments, they are interconnected with each other and they must work in harmony in order to produce that really excellent clinical outcome. So be it coming from the doctor itself, the nurses, the laboratory, or even the patient's care, it all play an important role and it works like a chain. So a successful IVF journey is then the outcome of this highly coordinated system from all these chains of functions and departments, where every stage they are all interconnected, much like a chain of processes that must work together seamlessly in order for that program to be effective. So ultimately, the overall outcome is only as strong as the weakest link in that chain. Now at Alpha, this is not our first expansion, so this model has already been proven. Take example of our recent expansions into East Malaysia in December 2025, where we operate our Kota Kinabalu IVF Centre. So over that few months, we have already clocked in an impressive clinical outcome. We have achieved fertilization rates of 84.1%. And then the blastocyst development rate of 82.1%. Embryo postal survival rate has been consistent across all the centers, 100.00%. And clinical pregnancy rate of 77.8%, as well as implantations rate of 85.7%. So these results literally exceeds the global IVF benchmark, and they reflect the strength of our system approach, which I mentioned earlier, where the clinical precisions, the laboratory excellence, and the advanced technology as well as the coordinated patient care operate as a one integrated framework. So what we are doing is bringing the same system across border into Indonesia, leveraging on the internal resources that have been built through their experience over the years. So these are the teams that processes that have already been tested in high performance environment. So as we expand, we are not reinventing the wheel. We are replicating the system, refining it over time. And the result has spoken loudly through the more than 10,000 IVF babies born to the Indonesian couple through our doctors. So for us, the consistency is the key. That is how then we ensure the clinical outcome or the clinical quality that you asked about, and also by building on something proven and then making it better and better over time.
Right, that's great to hear, really, especially the mention on Alpha IVF KK, which we had some conversations as well with our analysts and media friends as well. They are really looking into that, and they are kind of wow also by that, right? So it's living proof, really, that we are actually maintaining this consistency, and also your reference on the chain as well to ensure that every process is done correctly as well.
Correct.
So that's really important. Moving on to the next question, right? So what are the expected revenue contributions from the Indonesian market specifically over the next 3 to 5 years, and what milestones, that our investors should be keeping their tabs on?
Well, honestly, from my projections, Marcus, I would say that the real inflection point, it will come from year 3 to year 5 onwards, when our IVF centers, including the Bali IVF centers, start their operations, where then they can ramp up on the utilizations. So at that stage, based on our comparable center ramp up curve, Indonesia has the potential to move into a meaningful mid-single digit to potentially high single-digit revenue contributions to the group, depending on the utilizations rate and the case mix. But we are very clear that this is not a single-line projections. IVF is about capacity, it's about outcome, and also the trust-driven. So the revenue will literally follow when the clinical outcome mature. So from the investor point of view, I would say that the more indicator tracker for them to track, number one is the patient's conversion velocity across the satellite clinic that I told you it is our first layer. So this will indicate the leading indicator for the demand creation. Then secondly, we would then look at the IVF center when the egg pickup volume ramp up. Then once it is operational, you can see whether the market is really scaling. Number 3, which is the most important one, then it is the clinical outcome or the embryology outcome. Because as we achieve that high IVF success rate that is aligned with our group benchmark, that is where then it determines about our long-term pricing power as well as our reputation. And finally, the transitions point that investors should watch is when Indonesia move from being a network build-out story to a self-sustaining IVF hub, where the local demand, the regional patients, as well as the referral inflows start compounding. So in summary, in near term, Indonesia, it is an investment phase, but in mid-term, it becomes a scaling contributor. And over 3 to 5 years horizon, it has the potential to become a meaningful revenue pillar within the group, as we anchored on clinical outcome rather than aggressive volume chasing.
Nice, Siska. Especially the part where we are driving based on the outcomes as well. Very well thought. Right, so now we are moving on to the last question of the day. What role will Indonesia play in Alpha IVF Group's, of course, a broader vision of further enhancing our position as one of the leaders in this industry, specifically in the assisted reproductive technology field?
Right, so Indonesia is going to be a transformational market growth for Alpha IVF Group, and Jakarta is going to be our key acceleration point. We have managed to secure a full-fledged IVF center in BSD City within Special Economic Zone with approximately about 8.6 million of capex funded through our IPO proceeds as well as our internal cash. But most importantly is that Jakarta is targeted to commence operational hopefully by October 2026, way ahead of Bali IVF Center. So this will allow us to bring forward earnings contributions from Indonesia's most dense and economically powerful healthcare corridor. Strategically, Indonesia will be a scale driver for us, And by combining with the special economic zone advantages as well as our proprietary advanced technology and cross-border clinical expertise, we are positioning Indonesia as one of the key engines in building a leading Asian fertility platform. So with that, we're confident it will ultimately increase the patient volume as well as impact on the market.
Thank you, Siska, for joining us today. I'm sure there are a lot of takeaways, especially to our audience, valuable points that are shared. I believe everyone enjoyed this conversation as well, especially taking away a lot of valuable insights in terms of their action and what to watch out for Alpha IVF. So everyone stay tuned for our next episode. I hope you are excited as well as we review our next speaker. In the meantime, follow our social media, specifically on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and our WhatsApp at Alpha IVF Group. Thank you, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and of course, stay curious as well.